probably true to say that the London Southern and Midland Railway was one of the most ineptly managed of the myriad companies that emerged from the railway booms of the 19th century. It was a rag-bag assortment of routes that the owners had picked up over the years from various other failed enterprises. The LS and M, not to be confused with the London, Midland and Scottish, which emerged after amalgamation, ironically had no London terminus of its own, but shared a couple of platforms at Marylebone. It had sheds in Bristol and Chippenham and Yeovil, places like that. It was also obliged to rent access over the metals of other companies to join up the disparate routes of its own lines. Consequently, its engines and rolling stock could be seen wandering apparently aimlessly around branch lines and secondary routes anywhere from Birmingham to the south coast. Indeed, the income which just about kept it solvent was holiday traffic for trippers from Birmingham to destinations like Bournemouth. Although many of its holiday specials were obliged to take such lengthy detours to reach their destinations that most holiday makers spent their week at the seaside recovering before the desperate trek home. The management was always trying to think of new ways of deriving income, and most of their schemes were as mad as they were desperate. It was only the consolidation of the railways in 1923 that finally put its shareholders and passengers out of their protracted miseries. The number of harebrained schemes that the directors embarked on would fill several coffee table books. By the end of the Great War, the LS and M had acquired such a reputation for trying anything once that there was a stream of suitably crackpot inventors clamouring to sell the board their latest ingenious plans. In fact, there was even a regular column in the Inventors' Journal devoted to speculation on what schemes the LS and M might be induced to try next, which encouraged more and more of the amateur inventing fraternity to come forward. One week they had let it be known that they were trying to win a large contract for the carriage of high-speed mails and high-value packages. They only had to be able to get them to their destinations quicker than rival companies, but this prospect seemed absurd given their wayward, low-speed routes. And now, even more, the board was besieged by middle-aged men with goatee beards and brown suitcases until, finally, in August of 1920, they reached what amounted to the low watermark of their failing grasp on reality. Commander Bob Smith had been retired from the RAF the year before, having been originally transferred to that service from the Navy. In consequence of his naval origins, he sported a large, piratical, bushy beard. Oh, and a hook for a hand and arm, which he had lost in an accident with a tin opener while he was trying to demonstrate some scientific principle to junior officers in the mess. As this frankly bizarre accident had occurred in October 1918, he had been able to claim with some justification that he had lost the limb while on active service to his country. And indeed, he always sported a row of medals to prove his point. Quite what his bona fides were as a pilot is unclear, but there had been a number of incidents not entirely related to enemy action, and it is rumoured that the reason the Navy had volunteered him for flying duties in the first place was that they didn't want him driving any of their shiny ships. He had, though, participated in some way with the early experiments with aircraft carriers. Anyway, as was the way of things then, Wing Commander Bob had fetched up at the offices of the London Southern and Midland with an idea for a combined rail-air mail service. He would provide the plane a war surplus Blériot in which he would collect the packages from a suitable pick-up station and fly the mail on ahead of the train, delivering them safe and sound to, say, Bournemouth, where, by the way, he had an elderly aunt who would provide him with tea before returning the same evening. This all seemed quite promising, and the marketing department even managed a few posters showing a fantastically streamlined aircraft circling above an even more fantastically streamlined train. All very Art Deco and entirely misleading. This seemed to be the exact breakthrough that the directors had been looking for. Except when someone pointed out that the top speed of the Blériot at 47 miles an hour was some way short of the average speed of the crack express trains of the rival companies. The meeting broke up with the usual dejection and recrimination that always haunted such occasions. Undaunted, Winko Bob was back in the boardroom the very next week with a refinement to the plan. He had done some arithmetic and was able to show the very cigarette packet with his workings on. He could still beat the opposition, who would have to take a route through London, if he could take off somewhere nearer the destination. The savings would be marginal, but the publicity advantage of the rail-air partnership would still be there. There was still some scepticism when someone asked how long it would take to stop the train, transship the packages from the train to the aircraft, and could he find a site near enough the railway where the plane could be based. "Aha!" crowed Winko Bob. "This is where we have the opposition over a barrel. We carry the plane on board the train and launch it from there, with the train still moving." There was a slack-jawed silence from those around the table, but Bob was able to produce some exceedingly blurry photographs of aircraft launching from HMS Argus, which seemed entirely logical that the same principle would apply. All we need is a long straight section of track facing into the wind and an engine travelling at sufficient speed. Well, more sceptical silence ensued as the board members tried to picture which of their tired fleet of boiler-expired, steam-pipe bandaged tank engines might be suitable. "It's the latest thing," averred Bob. "If the Navy can do it, so can we." And then his trump card: "Next year, all the companies will be doing it." Contracts were drawn up and signed on the spot, and a pair of suitable flat-top bogie bolster wagons were adapted in the shed at Chippenham. The new service was duly announced and immediately caught the attention of the public. While the hoped-for high-value packages were not forthcoming, the company managed to produce and sell a first-day cover which would be franked on the journey, and which proved to be a great hit with schoolboy stamp collectors. The express duly left Nuneaton more or less on time and set off to the sound of cheers and a fanfare from the company brass band. All looked good. Another band had been booked for the platform at Bournemouth West, which the company was using. Bunting was duly hung and curious onlookers began turning up several hours before the train was due to arrive. The mail plane, they were told, would swoop low over the station, maybe perform a few aerobatics before dropping the mailbag and landing in a field at Southbourne, the very one where the Right Honourable Charles Rolls had been killed in an accident 10 years before. A fast car decked with bunting would then thread its way through the afternoon traffic, bringing Winco Bob to a huge and enthusiastic, triumphant reception, arriving well before the rival express. But this is the LS&M, and we're not really expecting things to go smoothly. By the appointed time at Bournemouth, there was no sign of the aircraft. The skies remained remarkably and obstinately empty. The band played, finished its entire repertoire, and started again at the beginning. The crowd began to grow restive. The regular S&D DJR train drew in and deposited its mailbags. Winco Bob's aunt, who had hired a taxicab at great expense to bring her to the festivities, began to demonstrate signs of impatience and tap the platform with her stick in a meaningful way. And then, an hour later than scheduled, the LS&M Mail Express wheezed into the platform and came to a ragged, banging halt. There, in pride of place on the specially built launching platform, was the tattered, blackened remains of the Blériot, the wings and tail entirely sheared off, almost the only thing recognisable as belonging to an aeroplane was the cockpit, in which sat the soot-begrimed Winko Bob, staring straight ahead and unmoving. Of course, as you have guessed, the inevitable had happened. There had been a derailment by a previous train on the expected route, and the LS&M mail train had been diverted via Bristol. What had promised to be a straightforward journey over broad gauge formation specially chosen for a train carrying an aircraft with wings sticking out either side had now become a twisting and turning series of junctions leading to the notorious Midland Tunnel. As he was running late, the driver saw his chance to make up time and accelerated down into the narrow tunnel portal. What entered the tunnel as a Blériot with a 25-foot 7-inch wingspan had emerged as a twisted jumble of soot-covered wood and fabric. The last that was seen of Winko Bob was being supported back to his aunt's villa in a chilly silence. And as far as I know, that was the only time in the history of railways that particular experiment was tried. Well, thank you for watching that 10-minute railway tale, and if you enjoyed it, please subscribe, because there'll be another one along very soon. Bye for now.